Okay. So apparently I am good. Okay. So I have a couple of stories to read to you from Haunted in America, True Ghost Stories from the Best of Leslie Rule Collection. That is literally what it says. True Ghost Stories from the Best of Leslie Rule Collection. So this was a book that my mother bought for me, God bless her, over Christmas. So this was after Halloween, and these were on sale, and bless her heart, she stopped asking questions. But I started to do a couple of the stories for one podcast, and I thought I would go ahead and finish these up so I could get the book to the little free library of supernatural stuff outside of my studio. So if you are in St. Petersburg, Florida, you can check this book out for others to read. It's a pretty substantial book of about 330 pages, but she had a couple of paranormal pet stories in it. So this one is from a discussion that she is talking about on Ghosts on the Road. And this is page 277 of her book. And it's an update. When the story about the hot ashberry appeared in my book, Ghost in the Mirror, in 2010, I didn't share the paranormal experience I had there. It was not a ghost story, but an experience that reflects the strength of the sixth sense of my mother, the late true crime author Anne Rule. As I was photographing the hot Asbury Street corner, a tabby cat strolled by, and I was immediately alarmed. It was a very busy street, and I feared the kitty would come to harm. My friend April was with me, and we examined the cat's collar, relieved to find an address and a phone number on the tag. We were on foot, and the cat's home was half a mile up the hill, but I scooped him up in my arms, and we headed towards his address. It was a rather difficult journey, however, because every few steps the cat jumped from my arms. I kept scooping him up as we forged ahead. Finally, we reached the cat's apartment building, and I called the number on the tag, and a woman answered. I told her, "I'm outside with your cat. I found him wandering around by the corner of Hot Asherberry." "He does that all the time," she replied, not the least bit concerned about her cat. She was irritated that I bothered her. She refused to come outside and get him. I was shocked because my cats aren't allowed to wander. I learned many years ago that cats live much longer when they're protected from the dangers in the world. The next day, when I talked on the phone with my mom, she said, "I had the strangest dream last night. I dreamt I was in a strange city and I found a cat. I was carrying him in a box, but he kept jumping out of it." Her dream was very close to my experience. I was far from home in an unfamiliar city, and I had found a cat that kept jumping from my arms. The only difference between her dreams and my reality was the box. I had no box, so I carried the cat in my arms. My mom and I were very psychically connected, and we sometimes had the same dreams on the same night. Her sixth sense was strong, and she occasionally saw ghosts. As she wrote in the foreword of my book, when the ghost screams, she sensed that the victims she wrote about in her true crime books were often with her as she worked, though she never saw them. And this is from chapter 16, Paranormal Pets. There are two stories here that we will read. The first starts on 3/18. It might surprise some people to learn that spirit encounters with pets are very common, but it never surprised me. I've always known that animals are spiritual beings. I have an extra special connection with furry creatures, and I've been a vegetarian since 1975 because of that. I rescued many animals over the years, and at the peak of my efforts, I lived on an acre with a permanent shelter that I had built for my strays. The population was 17 cats and 2 dogs. I saw each one through to the end of their lives, and most lived well beyond the normal life expectancy. One by one, the pets grew old and died, but because I believed with all of my heart that animal spirits lived on, just as humans do, it's easier to accept their deaths. In my book, Where Angels Tread, I shared an experience that my mother and I had when we said goodbye to a very old and very sick cat. We knew Siren was over 16 because she had been with our family for that length of time and was already full grown when my brother found her. She was a gentle calico cat, and when she got sick, I wanted to give her every chance to recover. But the veterinarian told me it was no use. She was very sick and in great discomfort. It was time to let her go. The vet told us to take some time to say goodbye, and I held Siren as my mom placed the oxygen cup over the kitty's mouth and nose, and as the vet had instructed. Siren's breathing was labored, and she was very still in my arms. It was clear that she was near the end. About 2 minutes before the vet returned, Siren suddenly became alert. She lifted her head to gaze intently at something that only she could see. And then she turned and looked over my shoulder, her yellow eyes wide, as if she saw someone behind me. What's she looking at? I asked my mother. She sees someone. While Siren had lived with various family members over the years, we didn't know her full history. She was a grown stray when my brother found her many years earlier. For all we knew, her original person had passed away and she was now here to take her home. Or maybe it was the spirit of Siren's feline mother there for her. My mother agreed with me that Siren saw someone and that either an angel or a spirit was there waiting to take her home. Neither of us have ever doubted that this happened when we're near death. I was about 7 years old when my mother told me about the scenario that played out when an elderly relative was on her deathbed. The lady had never been very tactful, and she had a bad habit of blurting out thoughtless comments. As it is often the case when people are dying, the elderly aunt could see the spirits of the dead relatives from the other side, and she began to talk to the people in the room as that only she could see. She pointed and exclaimed, "Why, there's Tom, and I see Sarah. Who is the fat one in the corner?" When I first heard this story as a child, I felt sorry for the fat one in the corner because I was certain that her feelings must have been hurt by the insult. Now I realize it was unlikely that the fat one was bothered by the comment. The spirits were there for the dying woman, and they appeared in earthly form for her sake. When my mother died, spirits were there for her too. I wasn't sure if I should share this because her deathbed story was personal, but I thought about it and decided that my mom would want me to. She cared about people, and if her story could bring comfort to a reader, then she would like that. In the summer of 2015, at the age of 83, my mom got very sick. The doctors told us that she would die soon, and they moved her to hospice. But before they did, they removed all of the wires and tubes. The tube in her throat had been so uncomfortable that she was unable to speak after it was taken out. But she could hear, understand, nod her head, and mouth words. She communicated to a relative that she had seen her mother. This made my mom very happy, and her face filled with joy. I felt reassured knowing that my grandma would be there for her when she crossed over. My mom was a big animal lover too, and I know that she had the spirits of many pets there to greet her as she moved into the light. A doctor friend of mine once worked as an oncologist and spent time with hospice patients. I learned from her that it is very common for our pets to greet us when we leave our bodies. She has witnessed many patients take their last breath. She explained to me that terminal patients frequently wait until their relatives leave the room before they pass. It was often up to her to tell these relatives about the last words spoken by their loved ones. The dying people commonly called out names in their last moment as if they were greeting someone on the other side. Many times when my friend told of the families about names spoken by their loved ones, they would tell her that the names belonged to deceased pets, often pets who had passed away decades earlier. Our pets don't always wait until the end of our lives to make appearances. My friend Wendy Yaddick was devastated when her cat Goofer passed away. He was a once-in-a-lifetime cat who was always there to comfort her when she felt sad. When her heart was breaking over losing him, Goofer did not let her down. Wendy was struggling with the loss and confided, "I tried to work through my grief in the next few weeks and thought of him often. One day I was on my couch when I saw him. He was walking through the room holding his tail up high." She stared in amazement at the slightly transparent cat before he vanished. Since then, Wendy has seen him 3 times, and her son has spotted him once. "I miss my cat," she said, "but I feel comforted in knowing that we are really still together." While Wendy's story is heartwarming, it's not unique. Usually people are comforted by spirit visits from their pets, but Nevada writer Louisa Swan admitted she was shocked. She was 10 years old when she attended her first and last seance. It was a sunny afternoon, and she and several younger neighborhood kids were playing in their backyard playhouse. "Our dog Blackie had just died," said Louisa. "The Regal Border Collie mix had been a faithful member of her family for 16 years. The kids decided to try to contact Blackie's spirit. They lit candles in the dark playhouse and joined hands as they imitated a seance that they had seen on TV. Speaking in hushed tones, Louisa asked, "Blackie, are you here?" There was no response. Louisa waited patiently, and others giggled. After a long moment, she tried again. "Blackie, if you are here, speak to us now." Nobody laughed this time. Because she was answered by a loud wolf. It was her beloved Blackie's distinctive deep bark. "We took off running," Louisa admitted. Just as Blackie appeared on command, the ghostly pets in the next story also seemed to respond to somebody who wished to see them. Okay, and there is one more that I would like to read, and that is The White Dog. When Kathleen Lee is asked about the scariest incident of her life, she casts her memory back to the 1960s when she was a cute 12-year-old girl with fire red hair that fell to her waist. The Ontario mother of 6 remembers how her own mother struggled to raise 5 kids alone. The year she started junior high school, Kathleen, her sister, and her 3 brothers moved with their mother to a drafty farmhouse in the middle of 6 acres of land in Winnock, British Columbia. "It was a rental house," said Kathleen. "It once belonged to a Japanese family, and they lost it when they were sent to an internment camp during the war." The kids found old, faded Japanese newspapers in the attic. Kathleen felt sad for the family she knew had once loved the home. The long driveway that led to a secluded 2-story house was lined with Japanese cherry and plum trees, and the overgrown land still harbored beautiful oriental shrubbery, long ago planted by loving hands. Sometimes Kathleen and her siblings were a little spooked on the isolated property, especially when the kids at school talked about the nearby institute for the criminally insane. "It scared us," she admitted. "We worried someone would escape." One dreary February afternoon, the family was surprised to find a visitor at the door. "It was a beautiful white dog," said Kathleen. "He was beautiful. And even more so, he impressed my mother, and she is not a dog person." The husky-like dog had a thick, fluffy coat. Her fur was pure white, oddly so. Most white dogs, Kathleen pointed out, have a little yellow or beige tone mixed into their fur, but the Carnegie's visitor had startling snow-white fur. The dog watched the children with inquisitive, friendly eyes. "My brother tried to touch her, but she backed away," she remembered. The curious canine seemed to want to join the family, yet she shied away when anyone came near her. The Carnegie kids put food and water out for the dog, hoping their mother would let them keep her. She had a collar with a tag hanging from it, but they could never get close enough to her to read it. Meanwhile, the dog, Scampy, a medium-sized mixed breed, their dog, Scampy, a medium-sized mixed breed, stayed in the backyard. This was a little peculiar, as Scampy normally raced around the house, his tail wagging, eager to greet visitors, dogs and people alike. That night, Kathleen watched television until she fell asleep on the living room sofa. It was 2:00 a.m. when she woke up with a start to an odd mixture of noises. The static of the TV was drowned out by the keening howl of Scampy. Kathleen sat up quickly. "I thought something was wrong with Scampy," she said. Then she realized that the white dog still on the front porch was also making noise, a low, throaty growl. Puzzled, Kathleen got up. The moon was full and filled the room with cold white light. Kathleen glanced up at the front door and froze. There, silhouetted against the door's windows, was a tall figure. The bright moonlight behind him blotted out his features. For a second, she wondered if she were looking at her own shadow. "I moved my head, but he didn't move." Cold terror filled her belly, and her feet seemed stuck to the floor. I could see the outline of his shoulders, neck, and jaw, but he was so big that he was taller than the door. I could not see the top of his head. I knew he could see me. I was so frightened it seemed like my heart stopped. I could not even scream. I just couldn't believe that this was happening to me. We were locked there with him watching me. He was menacing. I knew whatever was on his mind couldn't be good. Suddenly, the white dog's growl turned into a ferocious roar. Kathleen could not see the dog, yet she knew the animal had lunged for the intruder. I saw the man's head move from the window. Kathleen ran to her mother's room as she watched from the window as the white dog chased the stranger up the long driveway. It was too dark to see the man. Only the dog was visible, glowing white in the moonlight as she raced away. I went looking for the dog the next morning, said Kathleen, but the animal had vanished as quickly as it had appeared. She stood on the porch, wondering what had become of the mysterious creature. Then her eyes fell on the dishes they had set out for the dog. They were still filled to the brim. The food and water had not been touched. I showed my mother, Kathleen remembered. When she saw the food hadn't been touched, she said that dog was sent by God to protect us. The dog, they decided, had to either be an angel or a ghost. They checked with all the neighbors, and no one else had seen or heard of the pure white dog. Scampy refused to come around the front of the house for several days, said Kathleen. My brother Gary tried to drag him, but he wouldn't budge. Was the white dog an ethereal being? The fact that she had not touched food or water for the 12 hours she had sat on the porch was strange. And why did no one in the community know anything about such an unusual-looking dog? Wouldn't someone else have noticed the animal? Scampy's behavior, too, suggested that the white dog may have been from another world. Why wouldn't the friendly Scampy interact with the dog? The menacing intruder was another puzzling element. Was it possible that he, too, was a ghost? Or was he a patient escaped or discharged from the nearby criminally insane institution? If his presence was ghostly, could it have anything to do with the Japanese family who had been removed from the home? Was the white dog a ghost of a pet of the Japanese family who suffered the injustice of internment? Perhaps she had come back to make sure another family would not lose anything precious. Helpful entities may be angels or simply the spirits of those who have passed. While a dog appeared to save Kathleen, the rescuers in the next chapter are believed to be the ghosts of human beings. And so then we move on to more human ghost stories. But I thought you guys might enjoy that. I was very pleased to be able to actually finish a book of this size because life's been really busy lately. So enjoy, have fun, and we'll have some more stories coming up for you shortly.